continue. Yes. I know most of you are incredibly busy right now. So actually what you have to do this week is not super heavy, but if you have any wiggle room in your schedule, well, the thing you really want to start doing is getting that CV or resume done. Right. And like I said, the biggest time suck out of the resume or the CV is really like the internal like thinking you have to do, right? Of like, all right, what am I good at? What skills have I actually learned in the process of doing the work that I've been doing? And a lot of you are way too humble. You like to downplay how great you are. And doing a CV and a resume, a job application requires that you sell yourself, right? And a lot of us just like don't have that skill doesn't come naturally, so you have to like pump yourself up for it basically. But remember, like I have a few lines that I think help me just emotionally when I'm dealing with that kind of stuff. One, I really like the line of like, talk about yourself the way a like mediocre white man, you know, talks about how they talk about themselves, pretend you're Trump applying for the presidency and talk about how great and how perfect you are. Essentially, if he could be president of the United States, you certainly can create a CV that talks yourself, talks well about you, and do well at getting a job. The line that I personally like, and not everybody will like, it won't work for all of you, but I like to tell myself that I am a woman of the 21st century and I can do this. Right? I'm like, or the one I recently came across to, like, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. I feel like that one also works really well to like when you're struggling just emotionally or mentally with like, not feeling like you're good enough for something, that you got to find the thing that's like, well, you're going to do it anyways because you got bills to pay, because it needs to be done. And that's part of why I'm forcing you to do this. But like I said, you have a little bit of wiggle room in terms of whether you want to do a CV or a resume, right? And I keep bringing this up, even though it's not due until the end of next week, because I want to give you a little bit of time. Let me actually share my screen to like make an appointment with the career center if you need to. Don't mind this website. I was Yitzhak and I were comparing things where we're talking about research stuff, and where did the other one go? Oh, it's right here. Okay. Um, about his research, but you'll find under week 3 is the CV assignment, and I've gone ahead and put in here my the PDF of my CV if it helps you. Like I said, though, I don't claim that mine's the best one. I've been looking at the way other people organize their CVs, and one of the things I forgot to say was that with my CV, one of the things I purposely did was hide my years. Right, they're not the first thing that stands out, because I felt like I had some holes in here that I didn't necessarily want to, they need to be front and center, especially in graduate school. Like there were times when I wasn't teaching the whole time, and so I just kind of hit them, and it's really easy to kind of just push them towards the middle. They don't stand out. If you don't have those kinds of holes, if you want to actually bring forth the fact that you've had just a continuous, you know, um, work schedule, then you want to, push those to the end, make them a bold, or actually put them right at the top of where you're talking about your work experience, and then it'll be very clear to anyone looking at your CV or your resume that you like haven't stopped working basically for whatever however long time span you put in there. Right. And some of you have long work history. So, like for me, when I was graduating college, I'd had a continuous long work history. I had worked since middle school when I started tutoring. Right. And that kind of consistency can look good for some employers, but it's not absolutely like if you don't have that, it's not going to be something that will prevent you from getting a job, basically. Right. Um, so that please start working on those. If anybody already has one that you think is good enough, or that's sufficient. Upload it and get this assignment out of the way. Right? Do you have questions on this portion of it? No, clear as mud, just has to be done. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about with you all is something that I does not have a due date, but eventually I will give it a due date so that everybody gets it turned in. But it's attend an event, right? That at over the course of the semester you should attend one event and do a write up on it. I don't have the prompt for the write up yet, but it's going to be really simple. It's just tell me what was presented at the event and what you thought of it, right? It's not, I don't intend to make it more difficult. I just want you to attend an event and then tell me about it. So I'll have to share my screen again and show you some of the events that I've already started putting up. And I actually need to go in now and take away some of the ones that have already passed, right? These are no longer, you can't attend them, but there's some coming up. This one, Doctors versus Midwives, Caribbean Medical Encounters in the Age of Pronatal Abolition. I think I signed up for this one, did I not? Most of the time I'm linking here to the website where you can register for it. It should be really simple. And most of these, yeah, Eventbrite makes it really easy for you to register. Use your school email to register for this stuff. That way they know that you're not someone trolling. There have been issues with Zoom bombing and people being really sexist and racist on the Zooms of especially Black scholars. And so, you know, I think they're starting to be more careful with that stuff. And if you use your student email, and give them your full name and all of that stuff, it'll make sure that there's no problem with it. This in particular, where is the Dr. Sasha Turner? So she's a really, like, I have really been enjoying a lot of the stuff that like she tweets about. I haven't read her book yet, but I think this is something that as long as I can attend Thursday, February 11th, 8 to 9. So the time for us, unfortunately, a lot of these people are like in the UK or in the East Coast, and some of the times are super early, I've noticed for us. So like I'm gonna try to actually be up for this one because I've missed some other ones and I feel guilty about it. but uh, but all right, maybe that one doesn't work for you. There's other ones coming up. The stuff that I tend to come across more often that I will always link on here are things about race, European, especially relating to European history, but a lot of it also has to do with colonial history. So you'll notice that there's a lot of like French and Caribbean stuff on here. And that's just the stuff that I have come across. And it's very like, I haven't had to go looking for it. It's come my way. I get an email about it or I get a tweet about it. Um, but some of these I think will be of interest to you all. I'm going to try to dig further for more American history things as well, because I know that's what most of you will probably be interested in. But there's this one where it's several dates. And so there's some where like a school or some sort of program will put together a series of events. Two of them or three of them have already passed, but there's a few coming up that might be of interest to anyone. The only issue with this one is that they're based in the UK. And because they're based in the UK, you need to do math to figure out the time. Like that's essentially why I missed the first couple of things in here, was because I didn't realize that the times were all UK times. It's also, they make it seem like it's tricky to get the Zoom links. It's really not. All you have to do is sign up for their mailing list, and the mailing list is here. I just did it last week. You just enter your email and they will send you the Zoom links every week. Or if you find this too complicated, then you can always just ask me for the Zoom link on an event like this. However, it doesn't have to be anything like this. If it's an event that's happening on campus and it's a scholarly event, then it will work for this assignment, right? I just, because the school ones are easier to find because we are all gonna get the emails for those, I wanted to make sure that you have some options of things from scholars that we normally would not have access to, right? This is the one good thing about the pandemic, is that all events, all of these scholarly events have to be online, and they can open them up for anyone to attend. Like that's been the great thing for me. Like normally I wouldn't be able to travel to some of these places, but because it's online, I can attend and participate. Don't be afraid. In most of these, that you're actually going to get a couple hundred people attending them, and it'll be people with PhDs, but also students, a lot of graduate students, and a lot of even undergraduate students at them. I've attended a few of these that there's no mandatory participation. You can keep your camera off the whole time and just be like undercover in most of them. Same with the school ones, right? Has anyone attended any of these online events yet? No, you haven't been attending it. Wait, any scholarly events,
Every
Christian?
time I think about going to one, I always forget. Like there'll be some that they send like through email, and I'm like, well, this one sounds interesting. I think I might go to that one. And then I get caught up doing homework, or I get caught up like doing chores or something, and I forget.
And that's the thing that I've been finding too. So I've started now. I'm like, I used to have a calendar on my desk, and I don't have one right now. So I've had to put it on my phone, because then I can tell it to remind me 15 minutes beforehand, and then I can stop whatever I'm doing and go to it. But I have to admit that I have failed at that in the last couple of weeks, just with the semester starting. Um, Anybody else? No, not even last semester. You haven't been attending any of these events. Not even history department ones?
I've attended some, but they've been like conferences for like Mellon Mays, different things like that, or things that Mellon Mays puts on. They're very like casual. You don't have to turn on your camera or say anything.
So any of those would count. So if you have anything this semester, you can just pick one of them to do a little write up, a short write up for me, and something like that would work. There's going to be a couple of things coming up in the King Hall History Department events that are being put on. Do you know about these? No, oh my goodness. I need to tell the history department. We need to be doing a better job advertising this. So this started over the summer, actually, after everything went online. In the history department, they've been organizing events, usually with the history club, but then every so often having like, maybe someone come talk about like the election, things like that, that are just organized by the department. So you're going to know everyone there. You're going to know the professors and all the students there, but they're low key, like just very friendly. So I'm gonna make sure and add links to those into our website so that you all know when they're happening and what's going on. And they're only for like history majors and history department stuff. So I know right now, actually, the history department, we're trying, the idea just came up to have Dr. Duran come talk about race and racism in the classics field. And so that, like that, as soon as that gets scheduled, I will make sure and advertise it to you guys. So keep an eye out for anything like that that is of interest to you. But consider going to something that just feels completely different than the kind of thing history you're interested in. That's a lot of times for me, the value of these kinds of events is that things that my research has nothing to do with is available for me, and you never know when you're going to have to teach that, and when something from a conference or an event will be extremely useful, right? Conferences and these kinds of events can also be a good way of networking. I know a lot of you will feel too shy, especially to do it over Zoom, but you can at least start learning, okay, who's working on what, right? And from time to time, you're going to come across people who work on something that is really interesting to you, and then you'll want to follow what kind of work they're going to be doing, even after you graduate. So that's also the value of that. Is just like the professional aspect of teaching and of being a historian, right? Because regardless really what you end up doing, you're all historians, right? And part of keeping up to date with what the latest research is attending these kinds of events, right? Any questions about events? I'll make sure tomorrow that the prompt for that is up, so that anybody that goes to an event early can have that done and out of the way. Right. No? Okay, then let's go back to Weinberg, because the assignment you have to do Sunday by midnight is from the reading that only a few people had done by Tuesday, but you're all gonna have to write me your thoughts and opinions on Howard Zinn. And I want to emphasize that you don't have to have read Howard Zinn in order to have opinions on Howard Zinn. I haven't read Howard Zinn. His book was too thick. I was interested in it. Like every time I saw it, I knew how popular it was. And then I would go to the store and I would see it. I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna sit and read that big volume of history. I have other stuff to read. Right. But there's plenty written on it. Right. There's some texts that just become so well known and such like classics that you don't end up having to read them. You can just read what other people said about them. And Howard Zinn is one of those. Obviously, you have a leg up if you've read them and have additional critiques to add to it. But what are the questions in the prompt in the assignment that you're going to have to complete by Sunday? Asks you to take a look at the Howard Zinn educational website, right? The education project. In this project, I really want you to look at it the way you would if you were teaching history, right? Let's say, even those of you that know for sure you don't want to be teachers, okay, pretend you are. Pretend you're going to have to teach a class. If you're going to grad school, you might have to TA for a class on a topic related to Howard Zinn's book, or in the process of deciding whether or not you want to teach, you might end up having to assist in something where it will touch on the history he writes about. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to go to the website and poke around with your classmates and see if you can find anything useful, or if all the material you're seeing on the website really confirms the critiques of Howard Zinn, right? Because like I said, it's one thing to intellectually criticize something, and then it's another thing of like, wait, but am I going to use it in the classroom? Right? Is it useful in any way, shape, or form to me in a classroom? So I'm going to put you in groups, because I know not all of you are on computers. Some of you are on your phones and things like that. And so I'm going to hopefully put enough of you in a group that at least one person can look up and share. So as a group, I want you to decide if there's anything useful on this website for teachers, right? Especially K through 12, but if you find it useful for other levels, that's fine too. Or as a group, decide to give a critique of the website. Right? So as a group, you don't have to do it on your own. As a group, you can decide these things, and then pick at least one person who's going to share for the group. But you all can talk if that needs to, if everybody has something to say. So let me see. How many people there are? Okay, I'm going to put you into the breakout rooms. Let me see if I can do this correctly. And I'm going to create 1, 2, 4 breakout rooms should be around. So that this should come up for you in a minute. So go to your breakout rooms, and if somebody has the ability to share their screen in the breakout room, people should be able to share their screens, and that will help out the people who can't go onto into the website and take a look. So again, remember, you're going to look for what's useful. If you find something that's useful, or you're going to figure out what your critique of it is. So I'm going to come to say hello to all the groups in a minute. Okay, let me see. There you go. You should be getting your notifications for the breakout rooms.
We can't share our screens.
You can't share your screens?
No, when we click it, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Thank you. Let me see. Okay, I should have just changed the setting on that. Somebody try it. Aha! There we go.
I'm muted. Okay, work. Cool.
Okay, so I'm gonna then leave you guys and go check on the other groups.
Should I choose any grade level?
Yeah, and then maybe like a time period.
High school.
You guys figured it out, and I'm sorry. I think I had blocked the ability to share screens, but you guys, it looks like you guys figured it out. You guys seem like you're on top of it, so I'm gonna let you keep poking at it, and I'm gonna go check on the other groups.
Okay. They have a lot of time periods.
All right, it looks like so I changed the settings, guys. If you weren't able to share your screen, it was my fault, but I have now changed the settings so that you can share your screen if somebody wants to try it.
Okay.
If not, you can just keep doing what you were doing. Don't get silent because I'm here.
It was already pretty silent.
It's like it's a bit tricky, this website, because and maybe this is something that you might want to critique. Finding some of the teacher activities and resources, like you have to really kind of pick time
Refine
period.
your search.
Yeah,
I noticed that.
yeah.
I was trying to find like primary sources, and under teaching materials it's like explore resource type. I was like, oh, okay. But first thing is like articles, and then fiction books. Okay, there's nonfiction books, but isn't that what Zen had in his book? A lot of references to just other secondary sources. But picture books, I don't know, maybe in posters or songs and poems, those will produce some primary sources.
Check and see. If not, maybe that can also be valuable, right? When you are trying to engage students, if you can find music that's related or images or things like that, that could be useful, but I'll let you guys decide if it's useful or not.
Okay.
All right, let me go check up on one more group.
Filing my taxes right now.
Oh my god.
No, just jumped in.
I was just talking about this with the other group about how, and this is maybe a critique you might have of it, about how refined you have to make these searches in order to get something useful.
Yeah, we already tried like 4 and came up empty, so we're
Oh,
just mixing
really?
pieces up now.
Nothing there?
We were educating ourselves on education.
Yeah.
And learning about what really happened.
Yeah, so as I've been poking around the last few days on this website, I have found that actually a bit annoying. Usually for teachers, you want to make things super easy to find, and I don't know that this website really helps with that.
Like it should cut off whatever doesn't, or it shouldn't show
Should
whatever.
filter out everything that
Yeah.
isn't pertinent to what's actually.
Like the fact that we click this and hit go and nothing shows up, it shouldn't even be an option for us to click on it.
Oh, and that's actually that, and that would be a good critique of it. Like, how can you even have the theme there of LGBTQ and have nothing?
Or food.
Food, nothing.
Maybe it's their plan to have it in the future.
Maybe it's the time period.
But I mean, some of these aren't even like Latin X during the Civil War. I mean, that doesn't. Some of them are very
Yeah.
modern
Yeah,
topic
Topics.
themes.
Yeah, if you change, I mean, if you're interested in the Civil War era, click on something else, women's history. Yeah, that should give you something.
Nothing. No.
What was
The
book?
Howard Zinn book. Wow.
She
That's
came
a
to slay the life of
Yep.
Harriet Tubman.
Okay, this isn't completely useless, although you might decide it's not super useful. Sometimes you're oh no, actually it's only those 4. That's
Yeah.
not super
3,
useful.
yeah. And one of them's his book.
I haven't even
Self-plug there.
Because even for like, okay, if all they want to do is put like secondary sources or like works of fiction, like some of these things might be, that can be useful in teaching when trying to figure out what book, you're gonna assign with the history. But if they don't give you options, then it's not useful. Okay, I'll let you guys poke around a little bit more, and in about like 5 to 10 minutes, I'm gonna ask everybody to come back. I'm just gonna check on all the other groups and see what they're finding.
Okay.
Okay, let me leave. Well, some of you are quick to come back. I decided to just kick you all out of your breakout rooms, and I think we need to give everybody else 30 more seconds, and it'll kick them out automatically, because I think everybody was finding the same problem with the Howard Zinn website, the Howard Zinn Educational Project website. All right, people have 18 seconds, and then it'll kick them out. Who is it? Some people don't want to leave the breakout rooms. This is what I'm afraid of will happen with all the freshmen. They won't want to leave the breakout rooms. Okay, so who wants to share the problems they're finding, because everybody was finding the same problem?
We were coming up empty on a lot of search results, or there would be like, or it would circle back and it would give us Howard Zinn's book, A People's History of the United States, as a resource for a lot of different topics that we looked up. It seemed like it was plugging itself back in, or it would come up with like 2 or 3 sources, and that's it.
And the thing about the Howard Zinn book is that if you want, you can take sections of it for students to read, but probably you would need more advanced students. You would need students at the high school level in order for them to get what Howard Zinn is saying there. I don't think that would work for lower levels. Did anybody find anything useful? Yeah.
I was searching for any kind of primary source, and it was a little bit hard to find one, but under like songs and poems, I was able to find a primary source, which was a poem from 1950 written about the United Fruit Company. So I thought that was a win. But I decided to take a look at the teacher, what is this? Teaching activities. And there's this one called 40 Acres and a Mule, role-playing what Reconstruction could have been. And I don't know, last semester I was taking teacher prep, I forget, teach early field experience, and we were creating lesson plans. And one group had the Reconstruction era, and they were like, well, I think we want to do a role playing of the students pretending they're slaves and see how they would escape. And we had to tell them, like, that's really problematic. That's not something you should have students do. And this kind of just brings a little bit too close to like that kind of like a little bit problematic territory of how they're going to play the whole game of Reconstruction. So it's kind of weird to see they give this whole breakdown of how to get students to play the whole Reconstruction game as recently freed slaves.
So let me show everybody else, because I found the same thing. And this is actually the thing I was going to bring up. I'm like, role-playing games can be really cool and really useful to use. But then, and by the way, this is under teaching materials, under explore by resource type is where I found it. But yeah, this 40 Acres and a Mule one. And I was like, oh no, don't ask them to do that. And some of these sound okay-ish, like role-playing freed families. I don't know about that one, but there's one down here that I was like, okay, that one might work. Here it is. The third scenario asks students to imagine they either took part in or witnessed one of the mass wedding ceremonies that occurred in the aftermath of the Civil War. And I'm like, okay, that one's not horrible. And the plus and how they lay this out is that they tell you how it worked in the classroom for somebody. It's a teacher here explaining what they did and how it worked out. However, for this particular time period, I would probably stay away from role playing. It's just, you don't want to ask a student to act the role of a slave, and even a freed slave is not great. But there are other ways to use role playing. And there you just really want to, I'm like, this is why a lot of you are needed in the classroom, right? Up until really the 60s and 70s, when students demanded it, right? Even in LA County, it took students demanding to have non-white teachers to force the district to hire non-white teachers. Like it's been so bad for such a long time. Where was another one that I was looking at? Oh, this was another one that I thought looked super problematic, the Cherokee Seminole removal role play. I'm like, how are you going to role play the removal of Native people from their land? I don't know how, like.
Well, that's not cool.
I would say
Like, okay, everyone walk outside. We're gonna redo the Trail of Tears right now.
the topics we've had for like classes like that taught stuff like this in high school are more like just debates, like not necessarily role play, but like making it like a court case and saying, okay, like say your argument as to why this blah blah blah, and like I wouldn't say it was that well, I wouldn't say it's that effective to begin with, because it's kind of like I don't want to have like students arguing like why like in like Native Americans should be removed, but it's also like that's more effective than doing this, whereas role playing actually removing them.
So that's actually a really good kind of adjustment to make. Sometimes, okay, please present the legal argument. And even those though, like today I saw on Twitter, somebody was getting called out because they asked their class to do something like that, like pretend, like make the case for something terrible. And I'm like, and that's where you want to be careful, and you don't want, maybe it's you make the case against something terrible, right? How in a society that accepted this would you make the case against it? That might be more ethically sound than asking them to like see both sides of the question, when morally there are not two sides to the question.
I feel like an activity that could be done for something like that would be like the students are all arguing against why, and you're over here playing not necessarily devil's advocate, but at least saying like oh, but what if I say this, and then they have to argue against that, and everyone has to present a different argument.
That is more doable. The other thing to remember is a lot of times it's just knowing that era, and finding the primary sources of like Native people who wrote about their experience in the Trail of Tears, reading the stories of newly freed slaves. Sometimes, reading those stories and asking students to reflect on what the sources they're reading and their importance is good. Like that's great in itself, right? It's not even just like good enough. That's more than necessary a lot of times for them to see it from, the less told version of history, right? And that's where I'm like, we ask teachers a lot, really, when we ask them to be innovative, to be engaging, to not be boring, and then without having the tools to do it, which can lead us down some very problematic ways. And this happens actually at the college level as well. Right. One of the other things I had just seen on Twitter like 2 days ago was a professor who asked students to write about spirit animals. And this professor has been teaching for 25 years. This class was not the first time they taught it, but somebody in the class objected to this. Is really insensitive to ask us to talk about spirit animals. And there was a student in the class that came from a Native community and spoke up after that and said, actually, yes, I come from a Native community in which we don't have spirit animals. We don't believe in that. And it's very actually specific to different communities, the way the role that spirit animals play for each group. And for you to ask us to just write about this in a casual way felt insensitive for the student. And that's honestly, like, that might happen, right? Have any of you thought of like, what do you do if a student tells you, like, calls you out in class and says this isn't okay, what you're having us do, right? Because sometimes, we're well-intentioned, but we screw up. Have any of you thought, what would you do if a student in class tells you this is not okay? Cry just a little bit. And this is where, like, actually it won't happen at first, right? This usually doesn't happen your first time teaching or even your first 5 years teaching. but it like, okay, it's something that I've encountered. So I want to share kind of my experience, and that our first instinct, just as human people, I think, is to get defensive, to want to explain away. And I really think that as teachers, we can't do that, regardless of the level, right? That we want to model like, okay, we can be wrong. We can be wrong. And to admit it, and in the moment stop and say, like, actually, nobody's ever said that to me before. Nobody's brought that up, and reflect on whether the student might be right. And I think that's where some of us get into trouble, is in the not acknowledging that you might be wrong, and being afraid of like scrapping an assignment, right? Because I really thought a lot about, like, whenever a professor gets called out on social media, I put myself in the professor's shoes, and I'm like, I don't want to get called out on Twitter for doing something. But I also think about a lot of what compounds the problems in a classroom is when the professor gets defensive. And that's where students will react to that, right? They take a cue from you and they react negatively to the defensiveness, as opposed to acknowledging that there might be a problem, and offering to, the assignment, where I think students are more likely to, at least work with you, right? Where you don't lose the class right away. Because if right away, like if you act defensiveness, I feel like in a lot of those situations, you lose the class. They lose respect for you, and it becomes a problem the rest of the semester or the rest of the school year. And that's something that I had, like, you learn the hard way in terms of like being wrong, because you get things wrong all the time. As students, like, students are so creative and so like wonderful. You always come up with questions that I'm like, I never thought about that, and I have no clue what the answer is. And I'm like, I learned the hard way of like, you just have to admit, I have no clue. And this is why I'm like, I'm not strict about technology in the classroom, because usually it's something that I can ask somebody to look up. Right. And so I'm like, don't cry. It doesn't mean, it usually doesn't, when somebody calls you out publicly like that, they're offering you an opportunity to correct it. Right? Because they could keep their mouth shut and go to your boss.
I've thought about that in a sense where like addressing it like on.
Oop. Did he only freeze for me? Can you all hear? Okay.
Oh,
you're back.
It's my thing is like I feel like talking to students and like from the first day of class and like kind of letting it be known if you guys have a problem with something I'm teaching, something I've said, something that I'm like presenting, like all this activity, and someone has a problem with it, like let me know. Like there's no problem you guys having an issue with it. Like my job here is to like accommodate you, like, make everyone here feel comfortable and feel like this is like a safe learning space for them. So it would be wrong for me to just not take anything you guys say into account. So like let me know like now or whenever it happens, and don't be afraid to say something. Like I'm not here to fight you.
Yeah. And honestly, one of the things that gives you practice is, and that really is, that I encourage people to do, is to not be afraid of teaching difficult topics. Because when you start off right from the beginning, knowing that, hey, I know this is a topic that is difficult to teach about and controversial, it'll help you figure out how to do that. So like for me, the history of abortion, incredibly controversial, and yet it's my area of specialty, right? And so I struggled a lot with how to teach it, because I'm like, well, I'm not going to be okay with a student just having the answer, abortion is murder, and that's their entire answer. So I'm like, okay, how do I create a lectures and a classroom in which, okay, that's not okay, but asking them to do more than that, right? Asking them to view abortion as a historical topic rather than as a political or a religious one. Right?
Definitely not with role playing activity.
Their youth matter a lot, and whether students feel comfortable or not. Like they're like, for me, in terms of like abortion at the college level, just a conversation. Or like sometimes what I do is I give them an assignment that's literally like, tell me your opinion. That way, while a student might not have felt comfortable saying something in class, they'll vent on the assignment. And I've given them the outlet to vent and say their piece, and that's it. It happened like a lot when I was at UCI. I was a teaching assistant for a course on the history of the Holocaust. And on campus, we'd had a lot of issues with Muslim students getting attacked, with a lot of Islamophobia on campus. And a lot of Muslim students took that class, right? And I think a lot of them thought that they were going to get like a Zionist view of it. Fortunately, the professor who taught it was a genocide studies expert, and like she knew how to handle all the questions that came up from the students. And she wasn't afraid to address the issue of Muslims and the state of Israel, right? And connecting the creation of the state of Israel to the Holocaust, but also making room to talk about what problems this caused for Palestinians, for example, which is still an extremely hot topic issue. But I feel like sometimes it just takes practice and knowledge, right? If you, on a difficult topic that it's going to be politically controversial, if you know what the historical material is, that's your fallback. This is the history, and these are the problems of what happened, and you can't go wrong with that, right? Like you can't go wrong. In LA County, you're probably a lot of material that would be controversial in other places would not be controversial here, right? Like talking about the genocide of Native Americans, I don't think that would be controversial in most classrooms in Los Angeles. Whereas if you are teaching, in certain places, maybe in the Midwest and Texas, and where you might have students who have been taught to not accept that history. I've never had that experience. I don't know quite what to do, but I would like imagining teaching that there would make me feel like, wait, my backup is this is the history. The scholarship backs me up on what I'm talking about. Right? And the student can have a different opinion, but this is what the scholarship is. Right? The other thing it's controversial that I've encountered is the Big Bang. Things like the Big Bang and like the big history course. And you start with the history of the universe with the Big Bang, or evolution, when you talk about world history and the evolution of humans. And I'm like, I actually don't know the science very well. I know enough that I accept the story of evolution, right? And the story of humanity as being a key, evolution as being a key part of that. Things like that just come up, and usually you have to know and be confident in what you're doing and what you know. Yeah. Any questions? I'm like, that was the hardest thing for me when I started TAing as a graduate student. They did a 3-day training. That's all you get in graduate school when you're gonna be thrown into the classroom. 3-day training, and then it's like, here, take your own section. And I was most worried about people like yelling at me in the classroom. Anybody else worried about that kind of stuff?
I'm worried about cussing, to be honest.
About cussing?
I swear like a sailor, so I feel like that's gonna be a major issue for me.
Yeah, like it's so second nature now that it's like I'm gonna drop an F-bomb every once in a while, like, oh shit, I forgot my stuff today, or oh fuck, I forgot to grade this, and let it out in the middle of the classroom, and then the kids go home to their parents, and
What do the teaching education professors say about stuff like that?
Damn, I took that class like 3 semesters ago.
I'm gonna ask around, because honestly, to me it would depend what grade level it is. But usually, like if that's natural to you, if that goes with your personality, usually it's not a huge problem.
That's true.
I'm gonna have to give a safety briefing at the beginning of class and be like, I'm not directing it towards you. If I drop a textbook on my foot.
Like it depends. Like the Professor Gardner is saying, it depends on your personality. because I've seen professors like I've seen teachers like in high school where they're dropping f bombs, but it's like they're a likable teacher, like they get along with everyone, so it's like no one like really takes any problem with it. But when you're like one of those strict teachers and dropping f bombs, then that's when people start having an issue where it's like it feels more degrading than than a reaction.
Yeah, I think it has. I'm like, and I really do think like you don't want to hold back your personality. If that's your personality, you don't want to hold it back because then that reads as not genuine. And if you read as not genuine to students, they're not gonna like they know it right away that you're not being genuine, that you're not being yourself. And same the other way, by the way. I had a friend who's like the perfect like cool professor. She comes in and she drops f-bombs all over the place and she's super cool talking slang, and I've seen her teach and I love it. I love seeing her teach. And like I tried one day being her in the classroom, and it flopped so terribly. Like that is just not me. So I was like, nope. I have to be able to be. You have to be able to be yourself, because you can't sustain a persona for like the whole time period of the class. You just can't. uh, so that was also like one of the hard lessons I learned of like you have to be yourself and embrace that not everybody's gonna like you.
I was gonna have a question on like when students say something that's like something that like just gets you like you really said that like and you have to address
Like
it like
baboso?
like how do we like how do we deal with that, like because we can't lose like we're gonna get upset like I think about it like we're gonna get upset in class by students saying something 'cause it's like that's what it is, they're here to learn, like they're gonna say stuff that's like uh, but how do we deal with it, like how do we address it, because we can't just get upset like we
Yeah,
do
you
like
can't. Yeah,
online.
because and students will say stuff that's completely blatantly wrong, racist, sexist, homophobic, and especially at a younger age, it's whatever they're learning at home, they're going to want to repeat it. Mm, mm, and there's not one answer, I think, to that question. I think some of it is your personality. I think if it's part of your personality to straight out say that's racist works. um, for me, I tend to not have like my personality is of like I don't like to tell any student they're wrong, but if a student says something that's wrong, immediately correct it afterwards. And that way the class hears the correct the correct version of it. Or for at a older level for older students and at a college level, the class will usually correct it. Right? Like I've been in the classroom, especially like the world history class, when you get like people, students from all majors, somebody will say something racist or homophobic, and the class will correct it, and then you just back up the student who said the right thing. Yeah.
You
So
really
I've. Mhm.
like blatantly call somebody out like no.
You can. And I think that's like, if that's your personality, yes. Dr. Duran, last semester we were in person, came into the office one time and was like, I just told a student no, that they're wrong. And I was like, what did they say? And I was like, yeah, they were wrong. And so, you can. I think that's fair. And that's where like students who know that it was wrong will appreciate it. I don't think you should just let it go. I do think that stuff that's blatantly racist, homophobic, sexist should be called out. But there's also ways of doing it in which you're not embarrassing the student or you're not making them cry. Right? But a lot of it has to do with your personality. If you just tell them, nope, you're wrong, that doesn't necessarily make them cry if they know that's you, that's who you are. Right? Like if I started doing that to a student, saying, nope, you're wrong, and like yelled at them, they would know that that's not me, and I might make them cry. Right? Um, and if you notice a reaction for a student, it's something that you can always like pull them aside later and say, hey, why did you say that? Things like that are also a good way of handling it. I've never had to do it. I've been in the situation of in the classroom in graduate school, people saying homophobic things in the classroom. the professor initially did not react to it. I don't think they noticed that it was homophobic at first. A student called it out, and then the person who said it had to apologize after the class.
What happens is, like, hypothetically, it becomes like this giant argument. You as a professor, like, do you step in at that point, try to mediate, or just let it hash out and security or something?
I guess that would depend. If the class is having a discussion, then you might want it to fight it out. But I would step in.
Let's get ready to rumble.
If it's something really blatant, you want to step in. You don't want to let it get out of the hand and make it seem like it's okay to argue something racist. But it depends also on the topic, right? If it's something clear cut, like, if somebody says, oh, slaves were migrants. You're like, no, stop right there. I don't care what your textbook said, or what another teacher said, that's wrong. If it's something more political, then it's a different thing. Like on the topic of abortion, I do really have to be careful when I teach that. I'm like, having the research I know and all of that, I'm like, I think it's fair if people think it's murder, but you can't prove it to me. That's your belief. You can't prove it to me, but your belief is fair, and that's not what this class is about.
Okay.
Right, like, and that's how I treat, like, the issue of abortion. I'm like, that's not what the class. I'm not asking you to tell me your religious attitude, your religious belief. Let's talk about the history, and then I redirect to history. That's actually that's the safety of, like, a history class as opposed to, like, a political science class.
Oh, hell yeah.
When it comes to history, you can always come back to, this is a history class. Let's focus on the history. In a poli-sci class, I don't know how you redirect it.
It gets really heated in political science classes, like really heated.
I want to see, like, a no holds barred poli-sci class, like people just going at each other. Has that ever happened, Christian? Like, have you been to?
One of my friends told me that in one class they started, like, off the semester where it's like all the conservatives stand over here and all the liberals stand over here. I'm like, why would you do that? Like, you're letting everyone know, like, oh, that's the person I'm not gonna like.
Stay away from them.
Yeah, I think
that's
a
funny.
bad way to do it.
Because on this campus, I'm like, it's harder to be a conservative. Like, because I've spent a lot of time at UC Irvine. Fortunately, I left before the 2016 election, but I heard there were the Trump hats were very common, and I don't know how as a teacher I would have handled that, because a student I want my students to feel safe in my classroom, but I don't feel safe with a bunch of Trump hats.
I want to add on to something about that. I worked at a school, and when it was the election 2016 and Trump won, there was actually a student who had that big "Make America Great Again" flag, and he ran around the campus with that. And he got jumped terribly, and I could actually hear the principal on the radio screaming for the school police and campus aides to assist her in getting the student out of there.
And see, that's like so tricky. I'm like, I felt so fortunate that at Cal State LA I never had to deal with anything like that. But that will happen again. We'll get something that's the equivalent of that happening again, and you all might have to deal with, what do you do when most of the time you can fall back on school policies that prohibit a certain kind of clothing. At the college level, it's different because you can't send a student home for wearing a Trump hat. Kind of a thing. Yeah. All right, we've gotten serious enough. I'm going to stop class here. Remember to go in and finish those discussion board posts. Get them done early. I know you love procrastinating, but you have plenty of other work, and this one now should not take too long to finish. So get that out of the way, and then we can work on the CEs. Sound good?